True crimers, welcome to Break the Case. You guys, I'm really excited to talk about tonight's, I should say today's hearing with the director of the Secret Service, Kimberly Cheatle. Now, I have to say this particular situation and everything that went on with the attempted assassination is pretty close to my heart. For those of you who listened to a live stream I did with the assistant SWAT team leader of Dallas, who had been on multiple protection details, I think we went over a lot of that. I want to really concentrate on what happened today in the Senate hearings or in the congressional hearings, because I know many of you weren't able to catch them all. I was able to catch a lot, and in fact, I took copious notes. So I want to tell you what our Congress people said. So it was a rough day for Cheeto, as well it should be. It was a little rougher than I thought it was going to be, not than I thought it should be, if that makes any sense. You could really see the ire, absolute anger, disgust in terms of what these congressmen and women had to say. And I want to say that I think the reason it turned so ugly, and it turned ugly, I've got a lot of quotes here I want to read to you, but I think the reason it turned so ugly is because this was Director Cheatle's perfect opportunity to come forth and show the American public, I'm going to be transparent, I'm going to say what happened, because believe me, she knows. And from somebody who was behind the scenes, somebody who worked on Director Comey's protection detail, somebody who worked multiple details throughout my career of attorney generals and of the directors, and the aided in the presidential details. I am appalled that she would make statements she made in terms of not knowing what's going on, or I mean, it was bad. But let me go through what they said and comment on these for those of you who didn't get to see. So first of all, I want to start with, she listed out what the Secret Service's jobs were. And it's funny, the reason I think they asked was because I wondered if they thought she could even answer. Because at this point, she just wasn't answering anything. The easiest of questions, she said she didn't know, or there's an ongoing investigation, just absolute passing the buck and basically refusing to answer questions. So they started asking her some easy ones, like, what does the Secret Service do? And she talked about the protection details, and she talked about also their investigative side, which we've already talked about. They investigate credit card fraud and counterfeiting. She said, finally, one of the congressmen got her to say that there was an actual failure. What bothered me about that was ownership. This is the point in your career where when something catastrophic like this happens and you're asked that question, I mean, they had to just draw out of her. I wanted to hear her say, yes, it was a catastrophic failure. Someone's dead. 2 people were critically hurt. You know, how will those injuries affect them the rest of their lives? President Trump, former President Trump, was within a millimeter of being dead, or a millisecond, I should say, both. If he slightly doesn't turn his head, or he doesn't turn his head in time, his melon just is completely blown up with this particular round, a 223 round. So it's just amazing. And then, of course, we have Corey, who is dead, the fireman. And so it was just surprising that she just didn't take this moment to have some humility before the American public and just humbly say, I let down all these people. I let down the public. I let down people in the public who used to trust the Secret Service, who used to think the Secret Service really knew how to protect individuals, that they're the best in the business, the best possibly in the world. Well, that is completely off the table now. But instead of being contrite and instead of being knowledgeable and understanding what happened out there, one of the biggest failures that I think she said today that left me just in awe. She said, sit down if you didn't already hear this. She has not been to the site. She still hasn't gotten her director butt out to the site in Philadelphia. There is no excuse for that. Zero excuse. If I were in that position, I mean, it's not like she has trouble getting tickets. She goes like this, secretary, get me tickets. I'm going. This is inexcusable because as a person who is in law enforcement, you're on SWAT teams, whatever, you're on protection details, you need to be there and understand how it feels, to how far away that looked. You need to understand where he was when we see all these pictures of him walking around, where the bike was with the backpacks, where he was and all that film footage compared to where Trump was, where her sniper teams were, not just looking at diagrams or looking at after the fact videos. No, she needs to be out there to get a true understanding of exactly how this could happen. And she didn't go. Anyway, that's way further down on my list. I digress, but I just had to say, for me, that was one of the most shocking things I heard today. She would not answer direct questions about communications and about organizational issues or failures. In other words, did the locals not interface with Secret Service? Were they not? She acted like she just didn't know anything. Really anything in a nutshell, but I'm going to get into a lot of specifics. I have 3 pages that look like this. This was another item that was a real shocker. And for those of you who use encrypted apps, I don't know if you do. The only time I've used them is on not Secret Service, CIA missions. We use those to communicate secretly amongst each other. So Signal, as an example, is an encrypted app. It's literally an app where you can't get the information from it. And so she said she kind of floundered back and forth. First of all, I thought it was a brilliant question by the senator. I would have never actually thought to ask it, but I think he's looking in the future for maybe even charges against her. What is she covering up? Why are you using Signal? And he got out of her, first of all, that she was using it on her private phone, but she was communicating with her colleagues. And that's unusual. It's not unusual to do it. It's unusual to do it not on your work phone. So individuals, as an agent, I always had a private phone and I had a work phone. Why? Because you really don't mix the two. I'm not going to be talking to informants on my private phone, and I don't want to be talking to my family on my FBI phone. They're 2 different things. So she's saying she's communicating with colleagues through Signal. That just looks bad. It looks like she's trying to hide stuff. Why do you need to communicate with Signal? Why aren't you text messaging? What's so secret? That really bothered me. And then she kind of backtracked. She said, well, I didn't necessarily say we were talking about work. Well, what are you talking to your colleagues about? That's personal. Hey, you want to get a beer? This is, really a tough day for me. I mean, what are you doing on Signal that's of a personal nature with your colleagues? And then she said, well, I couldn't get it on my work phone. That's why I was using personal. But then she backtracked on that and said, well, actually, we can use it on our work phone now. It was like a dog on a wet linoleum floor. She was, just absolutely unable to answer the questions about Signal. Obviously, the congressman who asked that, he got exactly what he wanted, and he locked her in to some of those statements. And I think this is going to come in further later on when there's no time constraint, and they can ask her, who did you contact on Signal? What were your contacts? Because that looks super shady, super shady. Let's see. This really bothered me too. There's a lot that bothered me. Congress asked for one simple thing. Who were the personnel out there? Secret Service personnel, law enforcement personnel. Who's the personnel now? Let me tell you why this is so simple. When you do a SMEAC for an operation like this, which is your op plan, your situation, your mission, your execution, your administration, your comms, right? It's this plan. And those are the different sections. We call it a SMEAC. When you do a SMEAC, it has all that in there. It's under administration. It has every single person. It has their cell phones. It has their call signals. If you're using radio, 5DS2 to 2DS2, whatever your call signal is, it's right in there. The agency you're with, if there's multiple agencies, the full name. This is an op plan. This was done way in advance. The advance team was out there 5 days in advance, which is about right. And in 5 days, they are putting together this entire SMEAC with all these details. And you're telling me 9 days after an assassination attempt, she doesn't have the op plan that has the names of the individuals? And if she didn't have the names of the individuals for some completely out of space reason, she had 9 days. There's nothing more important than having a detail member go to, say it was the locals and they didn't have a name, saying who was out there. Who was out there in the parking lot? Who was out there on the perimeter? Now, that should have all been known. Like I said, in these operations plans, it has all of that. Jennifer Coffindaffer, Sniper 1. Carlos Stella, Sniper 2. Matthew Seghetti, Sniper 3. Our exact posts and where we're at. Local law enforcement, Ben Stone, perimeter, southeast corner of parking lot. I mean, it's that specific. The op plans that we did and that I was involved in on the director's detail and on SWAT details for executives, that's what they look like. That's why you're out there 5 days to do a little campground or a little fairground. You're literally getting together with everybody that's going to be involved in the operation. You're understanding what they look like, their uniform. You're working out the comm situations. You're checking out how you're going to get in, how you're going to get out, where the magnetometers is. I don't want to get into the weeds too much, but my point is they ask her for one simple thing, the list of personnel out there, and she would not give it to them. Oh, I don't know. We're working on that. It's in process. That was her big statement. It's in process. It's in process. She had to have said that dozens of times. It's in process. Well, the process was supposed to be this congressional hearing where she could answer those questions. It was terrible. Let's see. She also did not understand the roles of different people. And I wrote by all of this, I just wrote a big ridiculous. She should have known and be able to tell exactly how many snipers there were, exactly who was on the inner perimeter, who was on the medium perimeter, who was on the outside perimeter, no matter whether they were with her organization or with another organization. She should know all those answers. So there's no excuse 9 days after an attempted assassination attempt when everybody is at your beck and call in the Secret Service at this point, that you can't answer these questions. And I will say she could answer the questions. She chose not to. And she didn't bring anything with her either. That's a telltale sign she messed up during the proceedings. And they were asking her a question about, well, when did this happen? When did that happen? And she said, well, I have that on my timeline. I need to refer to that. And they said, well, where's your timeline? I didn't bring it. You didn't bring your timeline? How do you not bring your timeline so you can answer questions? And her excuse is, well, it's incomplete. How is your timeline incomplete after 9 days after an assassination attempt? I submit she's lying. And you know what? I'm not the only one to say that. There was a congressman or congresswoman actually, that said, I think she's perjured herself. We're going to pull the minutes and we're going to compare what she said with what's the truth. She needs to step down post haste. And even now, I think it's probably too late. She swore to tell the truth. This was before Congress. She should have just told the truth. She should have brought her timeline. She could have caveated it and said, listen, this is my timeline right now. It's subject to change. There could be more information, but right now, this is what we know. Wouldn't that have been so transparent for all of us, I think? So it was really disappointing. Again, they ask her about communication, like what they had set up in terms of, were you using radios? Were you using cell phones? What was set up with communications? And they wanted all that. Quote, it's in process. Okay, this was very interesting. And this was where one of the Congress people felt she perjured herself, which I was like, oh, wow. Because this was something that the Congress people knew more than what I knew in terms of about this particular point. And it was about specific requests by her social Secret Service team members, agents out there, for more agents and more resources on former President Trump's detail. Now, apparently there's source information. I think some of these agents might be talking, because I've always said this, and this is the same in the FBI. The street agents are just doing their job. They're doing the best they can now. This on-scene commander and some of these other people that were on this, I'm still head shaking. But for the most part, these agents, they are doing their job. When you look at the agents that were by his side, that shrouded him, that literally bullets are flying, they're jumping up. They have no idea how many shooters, where they're coming from, if there's going to be more, if there's another assassin in the crowd. And they are providing a human body, a body shield around him. Does it get more heroic? You're not going to go home to your children that day, possibly. You're never going to see your spouse again, your parents. Your life is over, and you're willing to do that. And so for those Secret Service agents that were there, my hat goes off to them. I don't care if she couldn't put the gun in her holster after putting her life on the line. I don't really care if some of the other things weren't done perfectly. I was on another show and kind of nitpicked some of that because I was asked to. And so I did, in terms of field of fire, in terms of, where they were facing, what they were doing. I nitpicked a little bit of that just to point out how the textbook way of doing things. But geez, you're out there under all that stress and pressure. That isn't, for me, what I think is at issue. What is at issue is the planning, preparation, identification of that high ground, of that building, and not doing anything about that shooter. We're going to get into that timeline, and you're not going to believe it. Maybe you've heard it already, but we got it straight from the senators today. Anyway, back to this request in writing. So they were saying, basically, there were requests in writing and that they were turned down. But Mayorkas has said, and they played the clip, said they were never turned down. Listen, when I see something like that, that's when I know Congress has something. And they have that spade in their hip pocket, that ace of spades, because he was just getting her to bury herself on this question, which was whether assets for Trump's detail had ever been turned down. Now, remember, a sitting president is going to have way more assets than a presidential nominee is going to have. That's just the way it is. They're their number one priority. Obviously, if the president of the United States gets killed, that is a huge deal. If a president that is or if an individual who's trying to be president gets killed, it's less of a big deal. I'm just telling you in terms of priorities for what the Secret Service has for assets. Okay, but where those parameters have to change is with somebody like Trump. Trump is not normal. He has so many haters within the United States. He has so many haters internationally. He had a threat that they talked about in this hearing from Iran, a threat that she knew about. That's when you say, okay, this isn't my normal, presidential candidate. They're asking for more assets because those boots on the ground agents, they know what they're talking about. That's what I was trying to say. Once you get up to headquarters and once you get up there, they lose track of really what's happening in the weeds, boots on the ground, what they need to do their job. It can get lost, and there's so many layers. The Bureau is so huge compared to the Secret Service. There's a gazillion layers compared to the Secret Service, but still, you're sitting up there and you lose track of really listening to your agents, I think. And this may be what was happening here, that these requests were being made and they weren't being granted. And I think that's going to come into play down the road. I think this is going to be a big deal. Oh my gosh, if I heard her say one more time that, well, basically the reason I can't answer your question is because we use a multi-layered blah, 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 blah. It was just gibberish, blah, 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 to not answer the question. And that is so wrong. And for her to think that all those congressmen and us, the American people, are not seeing right through this nonsense. It literally, there was a point my husband was listening to. We were giggling. We were laughing because it was so absurd. For instance, they asked her multiple times, multiple Congress people asked her this: who approved the plan, the SMEAC that I went over a little bit earlier? Who approved that? Well, we have a multi-dimensional, multifaceted, approval. And they're just like, yeah, but who approved it? Well, there's multiple. She just repeated herself. I don't care if it's multiple. And then they would say, okay, multiple people, give us a number. Well, I couldn't. You're the director of the Secret Service and you don't know who signs off on your op plans? I've been retired since 2016, and I can tell you who signs off on our op plans, a detailed op plan. You have your team leader, you have your supervisor, you have your ASAC, and you have your SAC. I got 4 people that I need to sign off on that SMEAC. She knows that answer. It's ridiculous to think she forgot it or she just didn't know. And if she doesn't, she needs to resign for complete incompetence. So this is either a purposeful withholding of information or an absolute idiot. And I don't believe she's an absolute idiot because she's using Signal. Why is she using Signal? All right. Let me see. Okay. DOJ, FBI. Okay, so I had somebody ask, and I'm going to do this right now. So they ask, how assured can we be that the DHS Office of Inspector General, who's responsible for not the investigation on what happened, but they're responsible for the flub-ups by the Secret Service. They're responsible to go up in there and say, this person should be held accountable. They either lied or they're incompetent or they didn't make sure to do their due diligence and their duty. They're the ones that are going to look at Secret Service under the microscope. Yes, you are right They're both under DHS. And so some of you might be saying, well, how in the world? They're both underneath Majorca. How are they going to both be, how is it going to be done correctly? This is my answer to that. So in the FBI, if you got in trouble and it was something like, say you drove drunk or used a FBI vehicle and drove your kid to school, or something that was major, but that was not criminal. Well, if you don't get a DUI, it's not criminal per se. I mean, in other words, if it wasn't in a criminal court, I don't want to digress. But the bottom line is, if it was something, I don't want to say minor because I consider all those things major, but if you're not going to be in trouble for a crime, that was handled by the Office of Professional Responsibility within the FBI. So these are FBI agents who have been FBI agents for years, and they go in and they're sort of self-policing. And believe me, no one wants to be on OPR except for people who want to be on OPR, if you know what I mean. I mean, most of us want to be working cases. We want to be putting bad guys in jail. We want to be working foreign counterintelligence, counterterrorism. We want to be in the field, making things happen. We don't want to be investigating our own, right? It's like wanting to be a meter maid and you're in the police department. That's how I consider it. So they came after you because a lot of times they weren't even where they wanted to be. But a step above that, when you were in trouble criminally, and so this is what I'm trying to get into, is the Office of Inspector General, the OIG for DHS. DOJ had an OIG and DHS has an OIG. And let me tell you, these agents, they are going to be very serious about their job, I believe, other than the fact they're under Majorca. He doesn't want to fall for this. Remember, really, he's even above the director of the Secret Service. So could he lose his job over this? Maybe with that statement he made, unequivocally, when they asked for more Trump assets, we gave it to them. I think that's problematic that he said that from what we're hearing now. So could he even be in trouble? And he's over the OIG agents. I see where people are going to be coming from, but I'm just telling you, from being in these organizations, the OIGs, and I used to be in an OIG before I was an FBI agent, they are coming at you hard. They're under no one's, the buck stops with them, and they're going to get down to the nitty gritty. And I think we're going to see some people in a lot of trouble over this at more of like the command level. In other words, the operator, we call FBI, we call them operators, the agent that was over the command agent, on-site commander. I think he's going to, or she is going to be in some trouble. The other thing is, Cheeto would not name that person. They would not name the on-site commander, which I kind of get it, because you don't want that name out there and then people going after them. So I actually do understand that. That should be privately done. But she wouldn't even name what their titles were, anything like that. And I thought that was being a little cloak and dagger. She just wasn't at all transparent. This was interesting. I think you all know this, though, that the shooter actually used encrypted platforms, and that he indeed apparently was communicating with international encrypted platforms. Now, this is what, and I wrote down the senator's name because I don't want to be held responsible that Jennifer Coffindaffer saying that. Congressman Waltz, W-A-L-T-Z, said that, if you want to find it in the hearing minutes, that Crooks was using these encrypted platforms, communicating with overseas people. Now, I don't think there's any way in heck. I know the FBI has already come out and said, and I do believe it. I know there's probably a lot of skeptics in the crowd, but I just have to believe what they say, because they don't really have a dog in the fight. Remember, they're conducting this huge investigation of everything Crooks is involved with. And so I don't know if they'll be able to determine, I hope they will, exactly who Crooks was dealing with or reaching out to, other radicals. I don't know if this is true, but Walt said it was true. So I found that very interesting that came out. But they made it very clear, and she made it very clear, that this was a single shooter. There was no other shooter from the water tower. And the reason I think that kind of grew legs was because the witnesses and eyewitnesses in these high stress situations, tunnel vision's involved, and they're very, very unreliable in terms of those details. So I'm not surprised that some might have seen this or heard that. It's very usual in these situations. Okay. This was interesting. So apparently, when the RNC was going on, what the congressman was saying, another congressman was saying, is you weren't going to be at the RNC, which is a huge event. So the RNC isn't like one of these where there's going to be, 20,000 people and in a field in Pennsylvania. No, this RNC is huge, so the protection has to be big. And you would think the director of the Secret Service, again, it's a very small organization. It's not like the Bureau that has thousands and thousands and thousands of personnel. We don't have very many agents. But we probably have now, I don't know, I always see figures, they're constantly fluctuating, but somewhere between probably 12 and maybe 15,000 FBI agents, maybe. I mean, we're small too compared to like a police department, but then we have support staff and we have analysts and secretaries and lots of other people that number at least double that, if not more. So we're a huge organization. Secret Service is very small, just a low percentage of so my point is that a director should be out there. An FBI director, no, but you betcha your special agent in charge is going to be out there. Maybe even assistant director for something like that, if you're in charge of something that big. And the point was, she was out there, and then somehow, I guess they got her travel plans, that she was supposed to be, quote unquote, I'm not going to say it like he said it. Well, I'll say what he said, hobnobbing in Aspen. So she was supposed to be in Aspen during the RNC. The point, I think, of it all was, you don't take such a huge event. Why are you not blocking that out to be there and over your detail? The RNC. Turns out she did go to the RNC. She ended up kind of canceling some of her plans or whatever. And she did say, well, I was going to go to the RNC for a little while, and then I was going to go to Aspen. I guess she was going to come back. I don't know. It just looked bad. It looked bad. It's just like, why didn't she go to Pennsylvania yet? Why during the RNC are you sneaking away to Aspen? It just makes her look like she was not taking her job at all seriously as the director of the Secret Service. One of the congressmen said, you need to, I think this was a female, you need to have the dignity to resign. And I so agree with that. When your organization is responsible for catastrophic failure, you need to step down with humility and dignity and just say, you know what? I'm ultimately responsible, and this was a soup sandwich out there, and I'm stepping down. You shouldn't have to force me to. And then, you know what? Maybe she could get another job. Maybe she would learn from that. Maybe she would show humility. Maybe her career wouldn't be over. It's not like she's a spring chicken. I think she has 29 years of federal service. So, I'm sure she's going to get a retirement and everything else. But it seemed like such a prideful, sort of in-your-face attitude. I'm not going to answer your questions. I'm the director of the FBI or the Secret Service. That was the whole presentation. And you could see it just I mean, some of these congressmen, wow, were they ugly to her. Really ugly. It was pretty bad. Let me see. So she named some of the elements that were out there, like the counterintelligence, right? That you want out there that's looking at things like crooks, supposedly, should be figuring out you're in the crowd, you're working the crowd, you're trying to look for anybody who snuck something in, who has something they shouldn't, somebody who's acting hinky. That's what that unit does. So we know she said they were there. How many of them were there? I never got that answer. Also, as you may know or may not know, Crooks had a drone. He was operating a drone. I'm sure some of you may know this. I'm just going to say this all came out during this congressional hearing. He had a drone that he's flying around. Again, that's part of that counterintelligence unit that should have been there. I was wondering, man, did they only have like one or two guys there for a crowd of over 20,000? And how could people, when everyone else is noticing, that are untrained, that are, they're, celebrating and ringing in their candidate, concentrating more on getting that close to a man that many of them really admire. And yet they're noticing this guy, and you have a counterintelligence group there, and you're not noticing him flying a drone. You're not noticing him with a field optics. You're not noticing him with a bike. You're not noticing backpacks. You're not noticing him scale a building and low crawl across a roof with a gun, a rifle over his shoulder. I mean, it's stunning. It's stunning. Everybody was screaming. We've all seen that. So I don't want to beat a dead horse. We all realize. But I understand now for the first time why people think this is like some massive conspiracy, because the incompetence here is so vulgar. And so it's like unimaginable that Secret Service could be this bad. Okay. Again, won't provide names. I understood that. They don't want to get their names out there and have every Tom, Dick, and Harry that's angry, stalking them. Again, the Congress asked for a bunch of reports that she said are in progress. I don't believe that to be true. I think she has the information. And remember, it wasn't the FBI. Now, the FBI is different because they're coming in. They're not looking at Secret Service and the failures. They're looking at crooks, anything and everything to do with crooks. What was in those backpacks? What was in that bike? What explosive devices he had? What was that detonator? How did he make it? The search warrants related to that. Anything to do with signal? Anything to do with that drone? Where did he buy it? When did he buy it? Where has he been traveling around over the last year or more? I mean, they should really be studying. Did he have other targets? Did he have other plans? Was this the first time he had a plan because it came to his backyard? I mean, they're going to be looking at this inside and out. I understand that they've got a lot going on, but they weren't the ones in the hot seat. This was specifically about the protection detail, and she didn't bring anything. She was so ill prepared, and I think she did it on purpose. 100% think she did it on purpose. I'm working on it. I have to check my timeline, but I didn't bring it. Sorry, I had to just say that one again. Okay, I want to go through the times a little bit. At 5:10, an hour, well, not quite an hour because he was shot at 6:11. At 59 minutes before former President Trump was shot, they knew that Crooks was there and identified him as suspicious. And there was all this conversation. Well, suspicious isn't a threat. Let me tell you, there's that saying, if it looks like a duck and walks like a duck and smells like a duck, it's a duck. And let me just go over all these things about him. So he's first observed. Now, by the way, this wasn't from law enforcement, and this wasn't from somebody in the crowd. Sniper one, that's how they said it in the hearing. Sniper one observed Crooks. Why did he observe him? Because he observed there was something wrong. He was suspicious. He was identified as suspicious. Listen, if I see somebody suspicious, until I get that sorted out, my protectee is not going on the stage. I'm just going to say, Mr. Comey, with all due respect, if you could stay in your car, that's what would have happened. We have a possible suspicious person. It's an hour before you're going to take the stage. We're going to just ferret this out. Sniper 1 of the Secret Service saw him. 5:10. Okay. At 5:28, Sniper 1 sees a bike with bags. Okay. For any of you, and you probably know this, I mean, if you go to Dallas Cowboys Stadium, any major stadium, sorry if I offended anybody saying Dallas Cowboys, any major stadium, you can't bring in bags. You can't bring in backpacks. If you do, they have to be searched. But I can tell you, in Dallas Stadium, you're not allowed to bring anything. You can bring a clear bag where you can see through it, and that's it. And your wanded magnetometers, it's a big deal. And that's the way it is at most stadiums now, most basketball arenas, blah, 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 blah. And, casinos, lots of things. So my point is, and she said this when she was interviewed, meaning Kim Cheatle was asked what things aren't allowed. And they went through the list of what's not allowed: rangefinders, backpacks, bikes, guns. They went through that list. And yet, Sniper 1 at 5:28 sees the bike with the bags there. That's pretty suspicious. I was running to a flight this weekend, and there was a backpack completely abandoned near the escalator. Like, there was nobody around it. And I was like, what is this thing doing here? Still don't know what happened. But the first thing I did, even though I didn't want to miss my plane, was I went straight to security. And I said, listen, right over there, it's a blue backpack. It's sitting there. You need to have somebody go check that out and figure out what's going on. Any knucklehead knows on a security detail protecting Trump, who is one of the most hated and a person with so many threats against him, that's a clue. So now we got a weirdo walking around. We got a bike with bags abandoned. And then now let me go to step 2. So that's 5:28. 5:31. We got crooks with a backpack. Remember, backpacks aren't supposed to be allowed. And a rangefinder. That's the right to measure distances. That is not suspicious. That is threatening. You add it all together, that's threatening. And literally, Cheeto sat there today because she got grilled. This was a female congresswoman. And she said, no, those are suspicious. Okay, then you shouldn't be the director of the Secret Service if you're going to say that's just suspicious. Then, okay, 5:31 for those of you who might be writing this down. At 5:55, oh, by the way, I forgot to tell you. So Sniper 1's taking photos and sending them to the command post of all this, right? And it takes till 5:55 for these photos he's taken of the bike and of the pictures to finally get to the command post. That is unacceptable. You and I can take a photo right now of something we see outside and send it to somebody else clear across the country, and they can have it in about 2 seconds. How could this something so important possibly take 45 minutes? But that's what this timeline. And again, this wasn't Cheetle's timeline, because Cheetle quite conveniently said, oh, I forgot my timeline, which to me, that's perjury right there. Okay. 6:05. Maybe she said she didn't bring it. She could have said she didn't bring it, but she didn't bring it is the point. 6:05. Sniper 1. Oh, geez. I think that's when Sniper 1 saw the man on the roof. I'm trying to read my little bitty writing. Yeah, I believe that's at 6:05. And then at 6:11, we know the shots rang out. What I found out today for the first time, because you never know what to believe when you see it in the media, they knew. They well knew. They well knew about crooks, and they didn't do anything about it till it was way too late. One of the congressmen, again, asked for perjury charges. Another one said, you have made us, meaning the United States, less safe today. Why? Because the world is watching this. The world knows that our presidential candidates, our presidents, our former presidents aren't protected in the right way because their underbelly was just exposed with this hot mess that we saw. She said she'll have a report in 60 days. No, that is just not good enough. The op plan should have already been done. Half of this should already be completed. More than half of it should be completed. Remember, it's the OIG that's doing the big report on what Secret Service did wrong. And it's the FBI doing the big report on what really happened out there in terms of crooks and anything else that happened. All Secret Service has to come up with is, and this is it, is what they did in terms of planning and preparing this situation. That's what they're supposed to be coming up with. And she's saying 60 days. So Congress was not happy at all about that. They had to subpoena her. That's what they said. Again, one of the congressmen said, listen, before this hearing, he said, I drove to Pennsylvania. I drove to the location because I wanted to see it. Doesn't that say a lot? And yet the director of the Secret Service never went there, even now, 9 days later. It's unbelievable. Maybe she was in Aspen. Let me see. Oh, gosh, this is another bad thing. I'm sorry I have so many notes. According to her, that building was not in the perimeter of the Secret Service. I'm going to repeat that. Was not in the perimeter of the Secret Service. That perimeter or that building was only about 100 yards away, 140, I think. Now they've come down and they said in this hearing, 140. How can that not be in the perimeter? Heck yes, that's in the perimeter. As far as a rifle can shoot, should be in the perimeter. I would have a 400-yard perimeter in all directions, 400-yard perimeter on full-on lockdown. And she said it wasn't in their perimeter. That's just unbelievable. Okay. Let's see. I'm hurrying up. Let's see. Hid behind. Okay. So, one congressman said, which was so true, all her answers were just hiding behind the FBI investigation, just one after another after another. Oh, well, the FBI has an investigation. Well, OIG has an investigation. Well, yeah, but you can answer these simple questions. What's the timeline you have? Obviously, Congress already has it. Actually, most laymen have it. I can look on Twitter right now and see the really good Twitter sleuths that do all the graphics. They all have it. I've posted some of them that were really good. They've got recreations, they've got graphics, they know the timelines. It's all recorded. So it's ridiculous to think with the power of the Secret Service behind her, she doesn't have, all of this gathered up and together. But instead, she chose to hide behind the FBI. Congressman told her, you've brought more shame upon the Secret Service than the lapses in the security that resulted in the attempted assassination. I was like, wow, her performance. And you know what? Not a bit of contriteness. Just, it was really disheartening to not see some emotion out of this woman for what those lapses resulted in, just from a human victim standpoint, and just from not just feeling sorry when you screw up that bad that this would result. Okay. Another Congress said there's zero trust in the Secret Service now. Okay, this was a great question, and it was by one of the male congressmen, and he said, what measures have you put in place over the last 9 days? Like at the RNC and other, and just other candidates and other people they're protecting. What have you put in place now? She couldn't answer it. We're working on that. What are you working on? You're the man. You're the man. She could say right now, from now on, we're going to have, 30 people on this detail. We're going to enhance this. We're going to do this. We're going to do this. And everybody has to jump and fetch because she's in charge. So I found it, I thought it was a great question. And to me, to prepare, she said she's made improvements. What were they? She couldn't or didn't want to say. She'll get back to you. Let's see. I know this is a lot. One congressman said that actually at 3 p.m., Crooks was seen with the rangefinder, and that at 3:45 p.m., he was seen eyeing the roof, kind of like surveilling the roof. So he was there very early and was doing things very early. And again, I submit, where is the counterintelligence part of the Secret Service? Why wasn't that perimeter locked down in the early morning hours? Lock that thing down. If you've got a 6 o'clock speech, lock it down. Lock it down a day. And you have to have people there anyway, because people can put IEDs there. That's improvised explosive devices. And I know she did say they had dogs, so hopefully they had bomb dogs to go and check. But you had to have that on total lockdown to prevent anything from happening well in advance. Probably 5 days. I wonder if the advance locked it down. Obviously they didn't, because Crooks was walking around at 3 o'clock with a rangefinder and eyeing a roof. Let's see. Okay. We already talked about drones. One congressman said, you have given your agency 2 black eyes. Let me see, I'm almost done. I think I wanted to just make sure I gave you guys a pretty good analysis for those of you who had not listened to what happened. Okay, I think that is the end of my notes. Yes, that is the end of my notes. So I want to go ahead and answer any questions you have. But again, these were my notes as to what the congressmen and women said themselves. And then I added in some things as far as just my analysis of that she should have had those answers in a nutshell. All right, if we got some questions, Jocelyn. Hi, Jocelyn. What measures are being taken to improve response times during emergencies in the meantime? Well, that's the $1 million question that one of the congressmen asked her. What are you guys doing to improve so that now, we're in the middle of a huge heated political situation, right? Now, Biden stepped down. He still needs protection. Now, Kamala is a presidential candidate. We still have Robert Kennedy. And plus all the other, what are they doing to revamp Trump's? They wanted to kill him once, whoever they are, him, Crooks, a person wanted to kill him once. What's to say somebody isn't going to want to kill him again? And those Iran threats are still out there. And I'm sure there's threats against, or general threats, just that you have to consider general threats, because there's all these people that are always writing, I want to kill so-and-so and I want to do this. So you have to consider those as well. Sarah feckin' Connor. Wow, a full name. And I love your palm trees. I'm just trying to figure out exactly how this kid knew where there would be an opportunity there. So these these lone wolves are amazing. And I always refer to like Timothy McVeigh. He drove up right next to a federal building and blew it into smithereens. Other people, whether school shooters, Stoneham Douglas, 20-year-old, walked in there but I know what you're saying. This was supposed to be a heavily protected venue with a former president speaking. And the bottom line is the ball was dropped. The perimeter only went so far, and there was no security outside the perimeter. That's what I'm hearing right now. There was no security there. And so if there's no security there, there's nobody to lock it down. And that 20-year-old, he had planned it. Obviously, he had planned it. He had a drone. He went out there early. He was there at least 3 where he was spotted that we know. I would submit the FBI is going to find out he went there earlier. I would submit they're going to find information that maybe he's planned other things. He is what we call a lone wolf. He's a domestic terrorist. They are the most problematic, and they can do so much. Look at after 9/11. Does anybody remember Richard Reed, known as the shoe bomber? He was an American citizen, but he boarded a flight and literally had an explosive in his shoe, was going to blow up a plane. And but for it being, he was in Paris on the connection, and but for the wick getting wet and the passenger seeing him strike, he had like a wick sticking out of his shoe, and jumped on him and beat him to heck, actually. We would have lost all those passengers. This was right after 9/11, when people should have been even more on the lookout, right? Security. So I guess what I'm trying to say is there's no good explanation. Grace Water, why is she hiding behind the FBI in your opinion? Well, because it's convenient. It's convenient to say, well, the FBI is doing the investigation, because she thinks that no one understands the purview of everybody. But many of us understand the purview, that we're in the circle. And the purview is the FBI is looking at the investigation. They're not looking at the Secret Service. The OIG is looking at the Secret Service, and the Secret Service is looking at the Secret Service, but from a little bit of a different, I think they're going to be looking at it more like a CYA, and this is why we did this, and this is why we did that. So she's blaming the FBI investigation, just trying to shield herself, saying, listen, they're going to know all the facts. I don't know it all, so I don't want to give you something that could contradict their report. But what I think she should have done was been transparent and said, listen, here's my timeline. This is what we think happened. Here's my SMEAC. Here's who was on the detail. Here's where we fell short. I don't know what the OIG is going to find, but this is what I see as I think they said a 29-year vet of the Secret Service. I thought she was in private industry. I know she was on 2 director's details, but that's the kind of thing that I think I was expecting to hear. I couldn't believe she stonewalled. Handsome Devil 13. Well, that picture is a handsome devil. Which questions were your favorite? My favorite one by far was, and I thought it was brilliant to ask, do you use encrypted apps? And it shocked the heck out of her that they asked that. And so she said the truth. Yes. And I do it on my personal phone with my colleagues. It's like, oh, that was by far my favorite question. SD, how did she even get the position? So my understanding is she served on 2 presidential details, so I've had friends in the Secret Service, and literally one friend was guarding Lady Bird Johnson. It's a terrible detail, right? Because you're really just a step and fetch. I mean, nobody wants to kill Lady Bird Johnson. So it's not what we call a high-speed, low-drag type detail. These are the types of details, the presidential detail, Trump's detail. These are the types of details you want to be on, because you have to be on high alert. You can't drop any balls. Things could happen, and this is what you train for your whole career. And so she had 2 presidential details that she was assigned to. What my point is that out of the Secret Service agents, somebody decided, and as a female, that she was worthy enough to be on a presidential detail, like the president. not a relative, not a former, not a vice president. So she had that going for her. I believe she had, in fact, I know she had private experience as well. You can see the one thing I did feel like with her, I don't want to say she was exactly well spoken because she never really spoke in detail about anything. But man, was she good at just shucking and jiving and playing the game and kind of never answering anything. In a joke, in a tweet, I said, it literally was like, and I'm dating myself, but there was this movie called The Best Little Whorehouse in Texas with Kurt, uh, Bert, whatever his name was, the handsome guy, Bert, whatever his name was. Anyway, and Dolly Parton was in it, and some other great actors. And anyway, there was this sheriff, and he was a Dennehy, I think is his name. And they would ask about the Chicken Ranch, which was this whorehouse, if you will. And he kept saying, he would talk and he wouldn't say anything. That's what it felt like today. She spoke some words, but answered virtually nothing. One of the other things, though, that she did say that I finally got some clarity on, only one shooter shot. Only one shooter shot. So there was this video going around that showed, the pop, pop, pop. I think there, 8 pops, or it was 6 pops. Pop, 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 6 pops. And then there were 2 pops. And then there was a late pop. But they sounded a little different, and sometimes they'll sound different depending on where you're at and the type of bullets you're using, things like that. So to me, it was clear that the shooter were the first boom, 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 and then there was a counter shot, and it seemed like 3 counter shots perhaps, but only 1 sniper shot. I thought that, for me, I wanted to know the answer to that question. Brody Man. How does the Secret Service ensure the physical and digital security of former presidents? Do they even do that anymore? Didn't Obama remove that before he left office? Snooch. So, it's a great question. What their tactics are in that regard, I do not know. I know specifically what I can comment about is the director's detail. And for me and my part, I was part of the physical surveillance of him and the physical protection of him wherever he went. So as far as the cyber and digital portions of that, I can say I do not know that answer. I could I'll phone a friend. It won't be today that I answer that, but I'll phone a friend and see what is done to protect the security. Now, if you're talking about security of conversations, now I have the answer to that. So when, as an example, when I was the SSRA in the Virgin Islands, I had a STE phone or a STU phone, whatever you want to call it. And that phone was encrypted, where you do all this and do all that. And then you're finally connected with whoever I needed to be connected with, whether it was my SEC talking about, top secret information, or CIA, or other agencies. That's what we use. That's what people who need to talk encrypted use. We use these special phones. So if you're talking about that, but if you're talking about the security of, say, the digital footprint of where they're at, I don't know. And I can phone a friend. All right, let's see. SRK9 Mom. She wouldn't answer anything. I know. Can anyone but the president fire her? I think Mayorkas can fire her. He is the head of the DHS. I don't know if Biden will fire anyone. And I think that's why so many people just hope she steps down. 60 days. Look at the timing of all this, right? We're at the end of July, so August, September. We're right in the middle of a presidential race. Obviously, Biden, now not running, has more time to deal with these types of issues. Certainly, Biden can fire her, and I think Mayorkas can. In fact, I'm very sure Mayorkas can. Whether he will or not, I don't know, because to me, once you get up that high and you say this was a terminal failure, this was a catastrophic failure, at the end of the day, he's in charge of her, and he put her in charge. So that's why I think we've seen him be very supportive of her, because he knows his head could potentially roll too. Bishop and Bell, did they have more security measures, in your opinion, at the Super Bowl you recently attended for a huge event like that? I mean, oh, I think that the Super Bowls have much more security. I mean, as an example, I know one of the guys I used to work for the NFL, and one of my counterparts, many of my counterparts had a different job than I had for the NFL, but they handled the security. They were the security directors for their particular teams. And I know, because I contacted one of them recently, probably a month or so ago, that they are already planning, working, and doing all the preparations for the Super Bowl in February. I mean, they went 5 days in advance. They're doing it a year in advance. So great question. I think the Super Bowl is safer. Let's see. Cal, Tay had more security. Sad. Yeah. It is. It's disturbing. And I do understand why it gives people pause. I do understand why people think, gosh, is this deep state? How could they possibly not be doing this on purpose? How can you have 4 short women on? And, they asked this question. Oh, I forgot about this one. I really feel like I have another page of questions, or not questions, but reflections of the congressman, because I remember this one specifically. They asked the question, how tall is former President Trump? And she didn't know. She said, well, he's over 6 foot. I know he's 6'3", and I'm just a layman out here, like the rest of you, have no reason to have to know that, other than for my analyst work on television and for my podcast. She is the director of the Secret Service that was going before a congressional panel. You would think she would know how tall Trump is. And the reason it's relevant is because who you may assign on that inner circle to do the shield. You can't have 4 5'4" men and women, so I was disappointed that she couldn't even answer that question. Can she be held criminally negligent? That's a really good question. I think the person that could be, well, no, I don't think anybody will, because typically law enforcement officers, federal agents, we're protected, because we're protected typically. But what I think could happen from a criminal standpoint, and I don't know, but they ordered every single word of the transcript that occurred to be re-looked at. And if they could get her on perjury, I think they would. So I don't think she's under the cloak of being an agent. I believe that, no, I don't think she's going to be criminally charged or anything like that. She did what she thought was right in terms of appointing who she appointed, and all of those people below her, I don't think purposefully did anything wrong. I think it was total incompetence here, from what we know so far. Alan Hinkle, what's OverWatch? Such a good question. So she said that, I don't know how many times. Let's just say a dozen. It might have been more. OverWatch. So she kept saying that building had OverWatch. I think what she means by that, well, not I think, what I know is sniper positions were over and were able to watch over that building. So she was trying, and a drone, I think, too. So I think what she was trying to say is, didn't matter if somebody was up on that building, because we had OverWatch to make sure nothing went wrong. The problem with the OverWatch was there wasn't any OverWatch. And when there was OverWatch, right, we know now that that recognized an hour early, nothing was done with the person who had the OverWatch. And in other words, when that sniper said that, that team leader, the command leader needed to get President Trump into a hard location where he was safe and not let anything advance until that suspicious person was identified and taken care of. Not shot, I don't mean. I just mean identified, gone up to him, what are you doing? And I think they would have been able to figure out, we got a big problem here. He had a detonator on him. That also came out. That's been flying around. We saw a picture. I even posted a picture on my Twitter, which I thought it looked like a detonator. Well, it was a detonator. Spaceman crazy. I'm assuming those plans are never made public. Do they ever get released? So probably not, because they are secret. SMEACs are secret. Our SMEACs were secret. And I even think in this situation, it's not going to be released per se. But I think we're certainly going to get a report from the OIG, and they're going to analyze the SMEAC as to whether it was complete, whether it was an incompetent SMEAC, or whether it was spot on and they just didn't follow it. All of those questions need to be answered. Okay. Would she have lost her job if Trump takes office if this hadn't happened? That's such a good question with everything we're hearing. And anyway, when a new administration comes in, that can happen. I can tell you, I won't say who it was, but I can tell you a very, very dear friend of mine was contacted about the FBI job if Trump gets office. So obviously Trump is looking at who is going to be his administration, who is going to be in charge, who is going to run things. He wants people that he has confidence in. There's no chance if he takes office and for some reason she isn't fired that he's not firing her. No chance. And I believe many, many people in those positions will be changed out, including the FBI director, I believe, which is normal. That's what happens when administrations change most of the time. Joseph Rapp. Jennifer, okay, sorry. What are reasons for not thinking Crooks was helped by another person in some way? Well, as I mentioned, the FBI, this was the utmost important investigation in the FBI. It's what we called all hands on deck situation. And when you had all hands on deck, that means whether you're in a swimming pool with your family or you're on vacation, it's everybody get in and you're coming to work and we are going to, the bell rings, we call it, and you full bore are going to be on this investigation. So everybody, you're interviewing these people in this section, you're handling the digital analysis, you're collecting all the cell phones, you're writing all the search warrants for all of this. Everybody is jobs are being put out. There's a huge command post with who is doing what, when, how, with this full on investigation. Somebody's running the command post. You have all your analysts in there. So you can get a lot done in a very short amount of time. And what they wanted to ascertain very early is, do we have to worry about somebody else out there? And they've ascertained that. And I think it was right for them when they knew, instead of putting it off and having everybody worried that there was another potential assassin out there, that indeed this was a lone wolf. And I can tell you the FBI number one concern are lone wolves. They're not people from Iran coming over here. They're not other terrorists. Obviously, 9/11 happened. I understand that. But we have more terroristic events, school shootings and Dave Koresh's and all the other mass shootings we have, everything we have going on. The domestic terror threat in our country is the number one priority, I believe. That and international terrorism as well is right up there. But I believe Director Wray said right now it's lone wolf, exactly this type of thing, because it's so hard to find these guys. Okay, let's see. Bushy eyebrows. They could be services like Proton Mail that are encrypted but based overseas. Yes, yeah, bushy eyebrows. I'm glad you said that, because when they said that, that he was using encrypted services. I think that is what they were getting at, is that they were overseas services as opposed to others that might be here, based out of here. That could have very well been what they said. But my question is, who is he communicating with on one of those encrypted services? Whether it's an overseas based one or whether it's not. And why in the world, unless it's a top secret type situation, literally, why are you even communicating about that? All right. Spaceman Crazy, does the Secret Service have medical staff? Yes. Supplies on site? Yes. For example, supplies for his blood type. So yes, we always know. And in fact, as an operator, a SWAT operator, and we all have our blood types. In fact, we had patches on all our uniforms that said O positive, A minus, whatever, so that if we were shot, we knew right away what blood type we had. We had a surgeon, trauma surgeon, that we took with us everywhere for our operations. So the Secret Service has similar type of assets, and a lot of those, for instance, I was a tactical EMT in addition to my other duties, because I had a huge interest in that. And most teams had a couple of tactical EMTs, but everybody is trained in first responder type CPR and things like that. But definitely believe they had tactical medics and tactical EMTs on their team. You have to have that, that can provide that type of aid and service. And I know for us, we had a special kit that we carried that all operators had. So, to do everything in terms of like an occlusive dressing, we had special stuff to pack a wound that would absorb the blood, tourniquets, EMTs and medics. Our medics had the ability to draw IVs. We had different medicines as well that we could administer for medical events, such as a diabetic attack or such as a heart attack. So in other words, the answer is yes. I went into way too much detail. Sorry. Okay. Yep. Whoa. Had no idea. All right. Jennifer Gilly. Hi. Welcome. As a case review on the overall OverWatch, isn't a high area the best? I still don't understand who was on the tower. She said no one was on the tower. Right. No one was on the tower that I know of. She specifically said that. They heard shots ringing out in that direction. I think that was just a misunderstanding by those in the crowd. But the OverWatch, no one had OverWatch on the tower. And unless they had somebody assigned below the tower or somebody specifically assigned to watch the tower, and that is what you do on details, is not glamorous at all. You're literally like, and it's really hard to do. But if your protectee is here and I have the aft watch, I have to keep looking there. Even when noise is going on here, this is me. Because I can't get distracted by this. For those of you who play football, I coached football for a long time, flag football. You have to, you can't leave your zone, even though you think something's going on over there, because all of a sudden you have the tight end go in your zone now, and you're a linebacker and you ran over here. It's the same type of thing. You have to have, you have to pay attention to your zone, your field of fire, we call. Okay, why didn't she do any press conferences? Yeah, that was a big thing that came out, right? I still think I have another page but we're getting to all these questions anyway. You're right, the press conferences, she didn't do one. I guess Majorca didn't do one. Nobody did anything. It was a decision she made. I think it was a bad decision. I think she should have came out. I think she should have flown there, got on site, looked everything over, and did a press conference there. And so even if she said, I'm not going to field questions, I'm just going to let you guys know what happened. I think that's what the American public was looking for, and some sort of humility and contriteness with this disaster. And we didn't get it. Her head's going to roll. Mark my words on that. Blueski's Blues. Are there specific training programs in place to handle assassination? Oh my gosh, yes. They do so much training. I think she said 30% of her budget, because that question was asked. Sorry, I have something. 30% of the budget is just for training. And why? I'll tell you why. And this is on the enhanced SWAT teams. We trained every week, all day long, one day. Why? Because you, in an emergency situation, you fall back on your training. You don't think, you just do. And if you don't do it with repetition over and over, think of all the things you all do, whether you're a hairdresser or whether you're an attorney or whether you're a doctor out there. If you do it over and over and over again, you get very good at it. So in training, we do these over and over and over again. 100%. They've practiced for this over and over and over again. And so that's why I think some people were upset at, one of the women, I think, said something like, what do I do? Where do I go? And another one had trouble with her holster. I'm not really going to give her much about that, but they do train over and over. But when it's the real deal, you get to see how people truly react. Okay, Mike Madison, welcome. JC, is DOJ doing the real investigation, or is DHS also heard HSI was in the detail? Okay, so one, DOJ is over the FBI. This gets so confusing. So the Department of Justice, the FBI is underneath them. So the FBI is solely doing the investigation on what happened in terms of crooks and everything that happened in terms of what crooks did that day, and not just that day. They're going to go way back in his life, and they're going to find every person he's been connected with, parents. They're going to do search warrants. They're going to get all those cell phones from all the people and clone them and have all that evidence, and they're going to interview all these. So blah, blah, blah. That's what the FBI is doing. The Department of Homeland Security, because Secret Service falls underneath them now, they didn't used to, but they do now, their Office of Inspector General is going to be doing the investigation of the Secret Service and their fallacies, what happened. If HSI people were out there, that kind of makes sense to me because they're under Homeland Security. They're Homeland Security investigators. So that would make sense. And you do need to force multiply in these things. I'm surprised there wasn't FBI out there, state police, sheriff's department, the local department. I'm baffled by why there weren't more people to do this protection detail. Handsome Devil, who's she covering for? Somewhat Majorca. I think she's covering for her people below her, but mostly she's covering for herself. So if you think like she's covering up a major conspiracy, I don't see that. I see major incompetence, and people are worried about losing jobs. Let's see. Welcome, everybody. Don't forget to subscribe. That's so sweet of you. All right, everyone. I'll take one more because I see Cal popped up here. I like the man bun. What training does the Secret Service provide to handle high-stakes situations like this? Well, I can tell you that in all of these, the type of training you're going to do, we do a lot of and I wasn't a Secret Service agent. I want to make that clear as an FBI agent, but I was in the latter part of my career, I was applied for and chosen to be on the FBI director's personal protection detail. And so what happens is you have to get a lot of training, and that training involves how you do formations, how you do advances, and it involves practicing. So you're actually working with simunitions and role players, and you're practicing, and it's constant. You're also practicing your marksmanship. You're practicing being in high stakes situation and making good shots. In other words, like coming around and doing room entries. How do you do those? Clear the corner, then you clear to your field of fire. You don't shoot out of your field of fire. So they're doing tactics essentially, and they're also learning to understand in advance how to do that preparation, and then also how to look at a venue and understand where all of those places are that need to be watched and where security personnel need to be. So believe me, they go over it and over it, and they hate to do it after a while because it gets so monotonous. But it seems like they need to do it more. Thank you. Thank you all. I want to thank you all. I'm sorry to keep you so long. I know I probably talked too long. I like to be short to the point, and I wasn't tonight. So I'm sorry, but I really, really appreciate you all being here. If you did like what you saw, I really hope you subscribe and join us again. And again, I just appreciate each and every one of you. Till next time, may justice be served.